Here we would do an in-depth analysis of Pramāṇas or the origin of knowledge. How does knowledge arise? So Sankhya Yoga had explained that Buddhi, which is intellect, takes on the form of object and is illuminated by Purusha, and that is how knowledge is wielded. And the Jains had told that knowledge arises because the wheel of karma is removed, which was henceforth covering the all-knowing self. Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika brings something else to the table. It says that every effect, including knowledge, is produced by an assemblage or samagri of some collocations of causes that unconditionally, invariably, and immediately preceded. This is how every effect, including knowledge, arises. So, knowledge must be treated like any other effect. So there is no mysterious non-causal knowledge. Knowledge is generated when a specific cumulative set of conditions come together. Samagri is the total cause of knowledge. It's the joint causal complex. No single element, be it sense, object, light, mind, soul, nothing, no single element is by itself the cause. Only their particular combination can be said to determine the effect. So, only the particular combination of these. Sometimes the absence of one constituent is enough to hinder the effect or to stop the effect. For instance, if the eye is defective, we don't see, although object, light, and soul do exist. So, no individual factor like sense contact can be called the Pramāṇa. No individual factor is the Pramāṇa in an absolute sense. So, only the totality of the relevant conditions is the Pramāṇa. And this totality involves or consists of the intellectual elements, which are the indeterminate perception or nirvikalp as qualification, then determinate perception or savikalp with recognition, then recollection, then knowledge of the ling or middle term in inference, then notions of similarity, upaman, and then hearing and understanding verbal testimony. Then we have physical elements like proximity of sense and object, the capacity of senses, and light, sound, vibrations, etc. When all of these cooperate in one complex, then Pramāṇ or the determining cause of right knowledge is produced. So Pramāṇ isn't just the instrument. Pramāṇ is the collocation of causes that generates a particular bit of valid cognition. Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika also, in this case Nyaya, it critiques Sankhya Sankhya account of origin of knowledge. So, if knowledge doesn't belong to Buddhi, as what Sankhya had claimed that Buddhi is unconscious, and doesn't truly belong to Purusha, because Purusha never changes or acts. Purusha is pure consciousness; it never knows, feels, or acts. Purusha is a passive witness as per Sankhya. Then where does knowledge actually exist? Sankhya has no clear subject for knowledge. Sankhya speaks of an abhas or semblance of contact between the Purusha and Buddhi. And Nyaya says this is unintelligible. We are just moving words around us without saying anything concrete, without giving any solid causal account. So Nyaya rejects Sankhya's quasi-mystical dualism. Nyaya says that knowledge belongs to Atman, so the subject is Atman, and arises causally when appropriate mental physical conditions are collocated. Then we have critique of Buddhist parallelism and Vijnanvad. So one certain Buddhist schools, so let's say one group of Buddhist schools, they said that knowledge and its object arise simultaneously in a sort of parallel correspondence. They don't make one cause the other, they just say they co-arise. No? That knowledge and the object, they co-arise. One doesn't is one isn't the effect of the other, and nothing is its cause. Nyaya asks that if knowledge and object are just parallel points in a causal chain, why should knowledge illuminate the object at all? What explains this correspondence? The Vijnanavadins, who are the idealists, say that what appears as knowledge plus object is just knowledge actually. The object is nothing more than or nothing over and above Vijnan itself taking that form. To that, Nyaya's reply is, if knowledge alone is appearing as the subject and object both, then how can knowledge split itself into knower and known? Why should knowledge as subject require knowledge as object, or let me rephrase it. Why should knowledge as object require knowledge as subject to manifest it? This is an infinite regress fallacy, right? Knowledge A needs knowledge B to be known, and B needs knowledge C to be known, and so on. C and D, D and E, and so on, infinite regress. So, Nyaya also rejects the Buddhist definition of Pramāṇ as prapya paritva, that is, capacity of being realized. That if all things are momentary, then nothing can have a stable capacity to be realized. Hence, nothing could be fit enough to be a reliable Pramāṇ. So, Nyaya concludes that Buddhist views cannot explain the origins of knowledge. Knowledge, like any other effect, must be produced when a joint collocation of mental and physical causes comes in the same plane as the other phenomenon, and no special transcendental mechanism is needed. The four Pramāṇas, uh, uh, which Pramāṇas are accepted by various schools? Charvak accepts only the perception, that is Pratyaksh. Buddhists and Vaisheshik accept two Pramāṇas, perception and inference. Sankhya Yoga adds Shabd, and Nyaya adds the fourth, that is Upaman. So, why the four kinds? So, there is one general idea that Pramān is the causal collocation that generates valid knowledge. But the kind of collocation and kind of knowledge produced, they are not same in the four ways, right? They are different in four distinctive ways. That is, in perception, there is collocation, sense, object, mind, self, and light. These all collocate, and knowledge is a direct awareness of a present particular. In inference, collocation is the knowledge of a pervaded to pervader relation, that is vyapti, and observation of the hetu is involved. So, knowledge is the awareness of an unperceived thing via a sign. Then we have Shabd. So, in Shabd, there is collocation, and that implies contact with trustworthy speakers' words and memory of their meaning. So, knowledge here is awareness derived from testimony. Then we have Upman. This knowledge is prior testimony of similarity plus present perception of something similar. So, knowledge is recognition of a new object by analogy. We have seen this example earlier, that this must be a gavai because it is like a cow. Even if the same object can be known by, let's say, seeing it, fire, you can know it by seeing it, that is pratyaksh. You can infer it from smoke, that is anuman. You can hear there is fire on the hill, someone has shouted there is fire on the hill, that is shabd. Still, because the mode of production of knowledge differs in each of these cases, Nyaya counts them as different Pramāṇas. Nyaya also explicitly rejects the idea that Shabd and Upaman are just forms of inference. Since the way knowledge is produced in each of these is distinct, that is, these are different collocations, of course, they must be treated as separate. Now we will look at the first Praman, which is perception or pratyaksh. So, Nyaya acknowledges only five cognitive senses as independent sense organs. It is eye or fire element, earth or ether, nose or earth, tongue or water, skin or air. Each sense is thought to be composed of the same bhut as its subject. That is, ear from Akash, because sound is a gun of Akash. Sankhya has also talked of phonative senses, which are organs of action like Vak, Pani, Pad, Vayu, Upastha, which are speech for Vak, hands for Pani, uh, uh, and feet, Pad, and excretion is Payu, and Upasth is reproduction. Uh, and Nyaya does not treat these as senses in the epistemic sense. These are just bodily organs for action. These are governed by the general motor functions. They don't directly generate knowledge. Uh, Nyaya's definition of perception is right knowledge produced how? By the contact of a sense with an object. That should be, this contact should be free from doubt and contradiction, and it should not be associated with other simultaneous cognitions, such as memory impressions or conceptual constructions. Key elements are right knowledge, which is the yatharth gyan. Perception must be veridical. Illusions are not perception if we analyze strictly as per Nyaya. Illusions are pratyaksh abhas or pseudo perceptions. Then produced by the sense object contact, that is indriya arth sanikarsh. The sense object must come into appropriate relation with the object. The appropriate relation could be contact or inherence based contact. Then it should be free from doubt and error. The cognition should be certain. It must not, there shouldn't be some shay, or it should not be misapprehensive or viparya. Then it should not be associated with other simultaneous sound cognitions. So the first pure perceptual phase is the nirvikalp phase, which is indeterminate, is free from verbal conceptual overlay. Only after that, the savikalpa perception adds the conceptual qualification that this is a blue pot. First, you see a blue pot, you don't have any think connecting that this is a blue pot. We'll elaborate on it later. So, uh, then what counts as perception? So, when you see a cow and simultaneously hear someone say the word cow, then the visual awareness of the animal is perceptual, and awareness of the word cow and the meaning of the word cow is Shabd Praman. It is not part of perception. So, perception is strictly the only right knowledge generated directly by sense object contact and not by hearing a name, not by remembering a word. Then we come to a very, very important section, which is subject of many debates as well, is nirvikalpa versus savikalpa perception. So perception is divided into two stages. The first is nirvikalpa perception, which is the indeterminate perception. It is the very first awareness when the senses touch the object. The thing is grasped before we connect it with a name, before we connect it with a conceptual description. At this stage, the object is taken with its qualities and with its universals, but it is not taken with any association with words. For instance, we don't talk about the word cow, not the word orange, etc. After that, cervical pratyaksh occurs, which is the determinate perception. It comes after the indeterminate moment, and that reveals the thing with its full set of characteristics. Added with that, it also tells its universal, which is cowness or orangeness, and the name and conceptual classification that this is a cow, this is an orange, and this is what is usually called perception in day to day life. So, if we see an orange, Nirvikalp perception is the raw awareness of this colored round thing with orangeness, but no verbal thought as of now. And Savikalp is this is an orange, which is subject plus predicate, and then name is attached, qualities are attached, universal, etc. So, if at the very first moment of seeing someone utters the name, so hearing that, if you see an orange and suddenly someone has shouted orange, so hearing that sound is a separate auditory perception. It is Shabd Praman. It doesn't fuse with the original visual nirvikal. The sound is a separate, it's an additional cognition. Are we conscious of nirvikalpa then? So later Nyayiks, for instance, Udyotakara onwards, they admit nirvikalp as a necessary first stage. But they say that we are not directly conscious of it, and we infer its existence from the fact that determinate cognition has to build on some prior awareness. Therefore, Nirvikalp is a pre-conceptual, pre-verbal reasoning that is subconscious or fleeting. Then we have a debate, Vachaspati versus Sridhar versus the later Navinaya. The Vachaspati Mishra of classical Nyaya school says that at the Nirvikalp stage, perception reveals the object as a particular. This shows its color form and also shows the universal, which is orangeness, but not yet in a subject predicate relationship like this is an orange. That is not there. Only the object is revealed as a particular, the color form is revealed, and the universal is revealed. Orangeness is the universal. This kind of perception exists for ordinary adults too, Vachaspati opines, not only elephants. So the name and classification come after that raw encounter. And Sridhar, who is a Vaisheshik commentator, he agrees with Vachaspati. He says that in Nirvikalp there is awareness of universals and differences. This is not that. But there is no memory of words. There is no explicit classification. Only at cervical stage we consciously order things as, this is similar to this is similar to that, it is different from that. We relate subject and predicate, and then we attach names. Later, the Navinay, that is Gangesh and his followers, they reinterpret Nirvikalp as purely logical and not psychological. So it is Nirvikalp is defined as knowledge of a mere predicate without association with a subject. But they opine that such knowledge never actually occurs in experience. In their opinion, all actual perception is already cervical. That is, they already are in a subject predicate structure. Nirvikalp is a conceptual tool for analysis. Nirvikalp is Nirvikalp is not a real experienced phase. So there is a shift. The old Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika scholars say that Nirvikalp is a real but pre-conscious first stage. And Navya, which is the Nirvikalp, it's a theoretical stage in logical analysis of what perception must contain. So Nyaya, according to Nyaya, perception always requires some form of contact, which is sannikarsh between sense and object. So six types. So they classify six types of contact in order to explain how we can perceive not only substances but also the qualities universals in absence of substance, which is samyog, which is the simple contact, samyukt samvay, which is contact with inherence. For instance, sense is in contact with a substance that has a quality inhering in it. Eye is in contact with a blue pot. The blue color inheres in the pot by samavay. And this structure lets eye perceive the quality blue. Then we have samayukta samavet samavay, which is contact with the inherent universal. Sense is in contact with the thing. In that thing there is color, and that relation is with in some way, with some way the color inheres. In that color there is color universal, that is rupatva in some way. I thus perceives the colorness, which is the universal aspect, to a three-level concept. Samyuk, Samvet, Samvay. Then we have Samvay, which is the inherence contact. It is specially used for auditory perception. The auditory sense is Akash, which is pervading the body, and sound inheres in Akash via Samvay. Ear perceives sound through this direct inherence relation, and there is no prior Samyog. Then we have Samvet Samvay, which is inherence of universal in quality, the perception of universal of sound, that is Shabdatva, by the ear. In this, the ear contacts not only the particular sound, ear also contacts the generic character of sound through a double inherence chain. That is Samvet Samvay. Then we have Samyukta Visheshan, which is the qualifying contact for absence or negation or abhav. For instance, seeing that there is no jug on the ground. The eye is in contact with the ground, and when we see an absence of jug, that qualifies, absence of jug qualifies that ground as empty of jug. The qualified locus is what the eye perceives. So, negation is perceived via contact with a locus qualified by absence. That is the Samyukta Visheshan. We see no jug on the ground, eye is in contact with the ground, absence of jug, we infer that the ground is empty of jug, and the qualified locus is what the eye perceived. So negation is perceived. How is negation perceived? Via contact with a locus qualified by absence. So Nyaya treats not only substance and qualities but also universal and absences, and both of these it treats as directly perceived through appropriately structured relations between the sense and the object. Nyaya-Vaiśeṣika sees the whole chain from first sense contact to bare awareness to cognition to evaluation as pleasant or useful or harmful, sees it as a single perceptual process as long as sense contact is the primary instrument. So for instance, seeing the orange as pleasant. So when I perceive an orange, first stage is the sense contact, wherein the eye or skin are in touch with the orange, and they grasp the specific color and hardness of the orange They also grasp the universal orangeness in samavay with the object. This yields alochan gyan, which is the bare sensory awareness. Then in the second stage, what happens? The memory is aroused. That sensory awareness of the first stage triggers a memory of past experiences of orange, their taste, smell, pleasure, and this gives rise to a sense of its pleasurable character, that is sukhadhi sadhanat. In the third stage, you exclaim that I see this as a pleasant orange. Now I have this judgment that this is a pleasant thing to eat. And although memory plays a role as the concomitant cause or sahkari cause, the knowledge is still counted as a visual perception. Why? Because memory could not arise without the present sense contact. Memory pertains to that very thing with which the eye is in contact. Therefore, whatever knowledge results from sense contact and refers to what the sense is touching, Nyaya calls it perception, even if memory also contributes causally. This is important because perception is not just a one shot snapshot. Perception also includes the immediate evaluative awareness built on that snapshot. Knowledge is not just a transcendent event. The production of knowledge is not some mystical or transcendental occurrence. It is similar to the effects produced by the conglomeration and movements of physical causes. So, as per Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika, it's not that there is a hidden adrishya shakti or extra sensory power needed. What is needed for knowledge is just the sense object contact, memory, attention, which are the mental operations, and some general cause like motion and vibration. Therefore, Nyaya-Vaišeṣika naturalizes cognition. Epistemology is just, it's just special physics and it is psychology. Then we have nature of illusion, that is Bhranti or Viparya. So, how Nyaya understands perceptual illusion is that atasmin tad buddhi, cognition of one thing in another, or alternatively ascribing to an object a character which it does not have. Yet the sense is in real contact with the right object. But the illusion arises because other conditions like defects, memories, or similarities, they make us misascribe features. Classic example of this is the mirage. Uh, that is, in mirage, the sun's rays are seen as a stream. So when in the desert we see rays and think they are water. So at how does Nyaya analyze this then? At Nirvikalp stage, eye is in contact with the actual sun rays on the sand. Up to here, there is no illusion. Contact is correct. But at the Savikalp stage, because some features of these rays resemble the appearance of a stream, that is, these are shiny or wavy surface, memories of streams are aroused and we misapprehend or misunderstand the rays as a stream. Therefore, the illusion is, it's not the case that it's a failure of a sense object. Illusion is simply the wrong association of characteristics with the right object. The Jayant's explanation. So Jayant Bhatt says that sometimes illusion is due to defect in the sense organ. For instance, eye problems, there is some defect in the eye problems, and sometimes due to rousing of memories of similar objects. The object in contact has its own characteristics, but the object appears with characteristics of other remembered things. So that is what illusion means as per Jayant Bhatt. Then we can have purely mental illusions as well when there is no current sense contact at all. So, mere illusion of irrelevant memories and imaginations can produce illusory cognitions. For instance, hallucinating a snake in complete darkness. So, there is no sense contact, it is simply irrelevant memories and imaginations producing illusory cognition. So, broader doctrine of illusion is called viparita khyati or anyatha khyati, that is appearing as other or misperception. Later Vaishesikas such as Prashastapad and Sridhar agree that the object of the illusion is always the real thing in contact. But how does illusion lie in? Illusion lies in superimposing the wrong attributes. Then another question which arises is why keep nirvikal perception at all? The fact remains that we never notice it, right? So the recall that nirvikalp is the indeterminate perception. It's the bare pre-verbal apprehension produced by the sense-object contact. So savikalp is the determinate perception, like this is a cow, this is a pot. There we have subject predicate. There we have universals and often a name. The Buddhist's objection is that uh, we cannot know a thing as a qualified, for instance, as a cow, when we don't already know the quality itself, right? So, cowness. So, how can you talk of a prior indeterminate stage? Buddhists claim that if you claim that you first have nirvikal perception of somewhere particular, and only later you add the predicate cow, then there must also have been some prior cognition of cowness, right? Otherwise, how can you apply the predicate correctly? Uh, they think that all qualified perception is mistaken anyway, so they don't need nirvikalp at all. So Nyaya's reply to that is that nirvikalp is a logical necessity. Every full judgment, like I see a cow, involves several relations at once. I related to the knowledge related to the word cow, and the object related to its universal cowness. To be able to form the proposition like this is a cow, it is a cow, the mind should be capable of grasping the universal cowness and the predicate content somehow. Therefore, there must be a logically prior stage where the mind imputes the universal predicate without yet relating to it as a subject. So, this is how Nyaya says that logically a prior stage is no, should be there where this mind just imputes the universal and but it has not related it to a subject. That stage is nirvical perception, which is an awareness of an object together with its universal or descriptive content, but it is not yet framed it as this is, that. And this stage is never psychologically noticed. That is, psychologically noticed is anubhav anubhut. It is only postulated as a logical precondition. So, if we have cervical judgment, then nirvikalp is just a logical precondition for that. So, Nyaya admits that nirvikalp is not directly experienced, but we need to explain it how determinate propositions are possible. Then, are the universals, qualities, actions, names, or substances really distinct? Here also the Nyaya and the Buddhists differ. So Buddhists' view is that Savikalp is fundamentally erroneous. They say that in determinate perception we say things like this is a cow or this is blue or the man is walking or this is a pot. So all these assertions rest on a false splitting of What is in reality only one in undivided substance. Only this undivided substance we falsely split into dravya, jati, guna, kriya, and name. So universal and particular are not different things. Universal and particular is just the same entity seen in two ways. So when we predicate a universal of a thing, we create a difference where no difference exists. They extend it to quality versus substance, that there isn't a separate quality in a separate substance. There is actually only one thing which is uh, described differently. There is not it is not the case that there is a separate quality in a separate substrate. There is only one thing described differently. Then we have action versus mover. That is, motion is not a separate reality from that which moves. Then we have named versus the name, which is named versus name. That is, sometimes, language fuses the completely distinct things into an apparent unity. This they showed through an example that we say man with a stick. We speak as if man with a stick is a single substance, but in reality, man and stick are two different things. So they say Savikalp perception is just comprises such fictions. To this, the Nyayiks, counterposition their argument. So Nyaya and Vaisheshika, they say that Jati, Gun, Kriya are different ontological categories from Dravya or substance. So our experience and our knowledge both support this. So we can talk about the same substance having different qualities at different times. For instance, we can say that the pot was red, now it is black. And we can count the qualities, universals, actions separately from the underlying substance. So this they use appeal to argue that predicating universal quality or action is uh, of a substance. It's not really a mistake. It is just describing real differentiations as for in being. Or as for names, Nyayiks agree that name or naam is completely different from the thing, and it's not identified with the object, unlike the universal or quality, right? Universal quality is identified with the object, that is beyond doubt. So when I say that is a cow, the sound cow is a separate entity from the actual animal, right? But the memory of this name, which is aroused by perception, is just a concomitant cause. And that doesn't make the perception erroneous, because we don't confuse the name with the object if we are sane. Then we have another objection by Buddhists, which is, why do you identify the thing you see now with something you saw earlier? Remember, Buddhists believe in Kshanikatva. Present visual perception only gives the present state. Identification with a past object is not itself seen. So it must be coming from the memory. So to this, Vachaspati Mishra replies, when you see something now and you think that this is the same cow I saw before, that cognition, has its causes, has as its cause certain things. It has as its cause the present sense contact. It also has as its cause the sanskaras, which are the past samskaras, the past impressions or memories. Vachaspati wants to treat this cognition of identity as perceptual, because the main cause is still the present sense contact, right? And supporting cause. So memory is only a supporting cause. But the Buddhists insist that the object of past experience refers to a past time and place. This object, it is not being experienced now. How can present perception directly grasp that? Then, uh, uh, now some might say that, Professor Dasgupta certainly seems to believe this, that Vachaspati's answer is not fully satisfactory because it blurs the line between what is truly given now and what you are importing from memory. It also ends up relying on a kind of testimony of direct perception that the Buddhists deny precisely. Therefore, Nyaya cannot reject Savikalp perception because Savikalp is not merely Nirvikalp plus name. Savikalp is a higher development of perception and it results from more complex causal collocation, that is, mind contacting self and object, uh, and it is enlivened by memories, and it is also supported by the physical factors like light. So Nyaya, much like Vedant, wants right perception to be understood as it is a cognition giving us a knowledge which we previously did not have. That knowledge is produced by appropriate causal conditions. And different kinds and variations of knowledge in the soul reflect different complexes of causes. So far, we have seen the six ordinary, that is, lockic contacts of senses with objects. Nyaya also introduces three alockic or transcendental contacts associated with the mind. So, the mind or manas is itself a sense organ. Through it, the self comes into contact with pleasure, pain, aversion, desire, will, effort. So, AI writers then they bring in three special types of contact that go beyond the simple sense object relations. The first is the Samanya Lakshana Sannikarsh. The second is the Jnana Lakshana Sannikarsh. Third is Yogaj or miraculous contact. The first comes the Samanya Lakshana contact. When we perceive a particular, we are also in a general way in contact with all other things that share the same universe. For instance, if we see a smoke, my eye is in contact with this particular smoke only. But in an alokik way or transcendental way, my sense is in contact with smoke in general, that is, smoke universal. So my cognition can span the class of smokes and it is not limited to just this one. Then we have Jnana Lakshana contact. In this, uh, you see, sometimes we perceive one object with one sense, but the other sense features belonging to other senses also we perceive. So, uh, for instance, if we look at chandan or sandalwood, my eye is in contact with only the color or shape of the chandan, right? But I also am perceiving it as fragrant. Although my nose is not, smelling it, the sandalwood, still I am, perceiving the sandalwood as uh, uh, fragrant, although my nose is not in contact with it. So Nyaya says that seeing or smelling sandalwood together have left samskaras, and a special contact called Gyan Lakshan allows the visual perception to call up the sense cognition as if present. So, Gyan Lakshan is a special contact. Through it, the visual perception calls the smell cognition as if it were present. So, but the knowledge acquired by Samal Lakshan and Gyan Lakshan is not counted as pure perception in a strict sense. It is a sort of mixed or derivative cognition. Then we have Yogaj contact. Yogaj contact is a miraculous contact. It is obtained by yogins. Yogins can, through intense concentration, perceive objects beyond the ordinary senses. And even though the future events, even the yogis can perceive the future events that later come true. Because yogins have a special kind of pratyaksha, which is yogaja pratyaksha. Ordinary people It is possible for ordinary people also to have some intuitional flashes, like a strong feeling that my brother will come tomorrow, that turns out true. This is that is called pratibhan gyan, and this is also credited to a subtle mental perception. So there we have an explanation of yogaj pratyaksha. Then there the Nyaya makes a sharp distinction between knowledge and pleasure and pains. So Gyan is that which interprets, conceives, or illuminates objects. And Sukh and Dukh are the different gunas that are generated in the self. Sukh and Dukh as of themselves do not illuminate anything. So we never experience Sukh and Dukh as if they were acts of knowing. We just grasp our pleasure or pain after some cognition. When we know that we are praised, we feel pleasure. So pleasure is a function of prior knowledge. If we imagine that pleasure is self-revealing, then we must admit it is different from knowledge. Because if we have the same kind of cognition, it doesn't produce the same pleasure in all people, or regardless of context. One person might enjoy something and the same person might suffer from the same, when he gets the same cognition, even though both know the same fact. Therefore pleasure and pain are not cognition. These are only qualitative states arising in the self due to the particular causal collocation, which is merit, demerit, or bodily condition. Pleasure and pain can be produced in direct perception, they can be produced in memory, but always they are produced as effects of causal conditions, not as inherent self luminosity. Then yogins, by deep concentration, can acquire pratyaksh of the most distant or the subtle objects. For instance, the heavenly worlds or minds of others or distant places. Ordinary people also can, get certain flashes of that Pratibhan Gyan. So, but Pratibhan Gyan is different from Manas Pratyaksh. Uh, in Manas Pratyaksh, memories from other senses are simply associated with a currently perceived object. But in Pratibhan Gyan, the cognition is about a future event. It's not something about present. So, but even this Pratibhan Gyan is produced causally, because when a cognition arises, it is first produced as an objective cognition, that you know that this is a pot. After that, the mind recognizes it and relates it to the self, that I know this pot. A field is called Vyavasai, that is recognition. So, in this broader uh, pattern of operation, Pratibhan Gyan is placed. Then we come to the next Pramāṇ, which is inference. So, what is the basic Nyaya definition of inference then? So, Anuman is making an assertion about something on the strength of a mark, ling, or hetu that is associated with it by invariable concomitants. For instance, if we say that there is fire on that hill because there is smoke, here smoke is the ling or hetu, the middle term or sign. Fire is the sadhya or probandum, that what is to be established. Hill is the paksh, the minor term, locus about which we are making the claim. What are the conditions for a correct inference? Conditions for a correct inference are that the hetu must be present in the paksh. That, for instance, there is smoke on the hill. Hetu is present in the paksh. Then there must be a, so hetu is that mark. So there is, and paksh, as we talked about, is the hill in this case. There is smoke, which is the mark on this hill. There must be a known universal relation, so there should be vyapti between hetu and sadhya. And wherever there is smoke, there is fire. This is vyapti, this is a well-known relation. And there must be no counter instances that there should not be any cases of smoke without fire. Later, when we see Paksha, Dharmata, Vyapti, and Upadhi, I will elaborate on these points, right? Then, when is a Hetu valid? So, we are still in the classic example of fire on the hill because there is smoke. So, the five conditions the Hetu must satisfy to be a proper reason. These five conditions should be met for a Hetu uh, uh, to be a proper reason. If any one of them fails, it becomes a case of hetu becoming a hetu abhas, is a fallacy. The conditions are first the paksh dharmata, which is the hetu must be present in the paksh, the hetu must be present in the subject. So hill really must have smoke. Second is the sapaksh satya, which is the hetu must be present in similar cases which are known to have the sadhya. So, or sapaksha. Smoke is seen wherever we know there is fire, kitchen, sacrificial altar, etc. Then we have vipaksha vivritti. That is, the hetu must be absent in all the cases where the sadhya is absent or vipaksha. And the fourth is that the conclusion must not be contradicted by perception or scripture. So there should not be pratyaksha badhita or shastra badhita. Then there must not be any counter hetu which would prove the opposite conclusion. That is, there should not be any asat pratipaksha. If any of these fail, the confidence in the conclusion collapses, and then we say that the hetvabhas or hetu is fallacious. So, what are the main five hetvabhasas? Which are the fallacies of the hetu? So, these false reasons fall into five standard types. Nyaya illustrates them with the controversial case of sound's eternity, right? Controversial in the sense that Nyaya says sound is non-eternal and Mimamsa says it is eternal. So the first is asiddha hetu, which is the unproved or non-existent reason. So here the hetu doesn't even exist in the paksh. That is, it fails paksh dharmata. For instance, if we say sound is eternal because it is visible, so visibility is taken as a hetu, but the paksh is not visible at all. So the hetu is asiddh here, that it is non-established. It fails paksh dharmata. Then we have viruddha hetu or the contradictory reason. So in this case, hetu proves the opposite of what you want, right? For example, if you say sound is eternal because it is created, now being created or kartakatva is the hetu. But we know that whatever is created is non-eternal, right? So this hetu is present only in vipaksha, and thus it proves non-eternality, not eternality. And third, we have anekantika hetu or the inconclusive or indeterminate reason. In this case, hetu occurs both where the sadh is present. Hetu also occurs where it is absent, so it doesn't really explain anything. So we say sound is eternal since it is an object of knowledge or prameya tattva. Sound is eternal because it is prameya tattva, prameyatva, object of knowledge, prameyatva. Now, being an object of knowledge is true for eternal things like Akash, but it is also true of non-eternal things. So the concomitance is not exclusive. So Hetu is anekantika, so is non-pervasive. Non-pervasive. Then we have Kalatyaya Padista, that is the timing contradicted fallacy. Now, here the conclusion is directly contradicted by perception. So, the hetu is useless. If you say fire is not hot because it is created like a pot, here perception says fire is hot. So what are you trying to prove then? So any other reason trying to prove the opposite is invalid, right? Regardless of the form. Then we have prakarana sama, which is the equally balanced reason. Here we have opposite hetus available in the same context, and they support contradictory conclusions with no way to decide. For instance, if you say sound like a pot is non eternal because it is created, then you also say sound like Akash is eternal because no non eternal qualities are found in it. So these two symmetrical reasons yield opposite results. So in such a stalemate, uh, uh, the hetu is prakaran sama, and no, it cannot ground certain knowledge. Then Nyaya and Buddhists have also collided on the basis of inference, especially in the context of the Charvak skepticism. Charvak had doubted all inference. So first we have the Buddhist proposal. So Buddhists say that inferential arguments are valid because nature, it shows a uniformity in two relations. Tadatmya, which is the essential identity. For example, this is a tree because it is a pine. Pine and tree are related as species and genus. So the treeness is essentially identical with the specific fineness in that very instance. And second is the we are talking about the two uniformities. First one was tadatmya, second is the tadutpatti, which is the succession in cause and effect relation. For instance, there is fire because there is smoke. So smoke is always produced by fire. So uniform succession of effect after cause justifies the inference. Therefore, for the Buddhists, all inference is grounded in either an underlying identity of essence from genus to species or because of a cause effect succession. Nyaya's reply to this is all we need is an invariable association or niyam or vyapti. Nyaya agrees that genus to species and cause to effect are important, but what is really consequential or important is simply an invariable association between hetu and sadhya, not any special metaphysical relation. For instance, if the inference that this is a tree because it is a pine rested on identity, then the reverse, that this is a pine because it is a tree, should also be valid because identity is symmetric, but that is clearly not so. So, the inference is not due to pure identity, but it is to the fact that pine is invariably associated with being a tree, and the niyam between the ling and the lingin, that is uh, between the mark and possessor of the mark. Now, regarding the tadutpatti, which is the cause to effect succession, that tadutpatti too is a case of invariable association in a temporal order. So, tadutpatti is invariable association in a temporal order. So Nyaya just wants a basis that also covers non-causal inferences. For instance, from the rise of a star, we infer the rise of a ocean tide, which they treat as a regular concurrence, even if causal linkage is not understood. Therefore, Nyaya says that don't restrict inference to identity or cause effect. The fundamental notion is simply that wherever hetu occurs, sadhya occurs, and it is so in a fixed or exceptionless pattern. Yeah. So, Tadutpati is also an invariable association, but we also want a basis for non-causal inferences. So, we want wherever hetu occurs, sadhya occurs, in a fixed exceptionless pattern or Vyapti. So how inference actually works, that is Vyapti plus Tritiya Ling Paramarsh. So Nyaya's psychology of inference is that through repeated experience, we observe many cases like where there is smoke, there is fire. From this, we have the general relation of Vyapti, that is concomitance of smoke with fire. Now, later we see smoke on a distant hill, and then we recall the Vyapti, that is, smoke is invariably connected with fire. Then we have a special cognition, that is, smoke on the hill is linked via the known Vyapti with fire. So, this is called Tritiya Ling Paramarsh, or the third stage consideration of the mark. And from this Paramarsh, we uh, arises the inferential cognition or anumiti, that therefore there is fire on the hill. Therefore, so the immediate cause of the inferential knowledge is not just seeing smoke, but the fact that we see smoke, we remember the Vyapti, and we have the Paramarsh. So that is the Tritiya Ling Paramarsh, the third stage consciousness of the mark, the Paramarsh being the special cognition that the smoke on the hill is linked via the known with fire. Then we have Bahir Vyapti versus Antar Vyapti. So Bahir Vyapti is the concomitance looked at as a relation among external cases. So Bahir Vyapti is the concomitance looked at relation among the external cases. For instance, in all observed places where there is smoke, there is fire. And then Antarvyapti, which is the inner conviction of necessary connection, that there cannot be smoke without fire. That is Antarvyapti. So Buddhists who are skeptical of universals and outer regularities, so Buddhists preferred Antarvyapti, which is pure inner conviction, as the basis of inference. Nyaya accepts both, but it places greater emphasis on careful observation of many external cases, Bahirvyapti, to build Antarvyapti. So, to reiterate, Bahirvyapti is we look at a relation among external cases, that is, in all observed cases where there is smoke, there is fire. Then Antarvyapti is the inner conviction of necessary connection, that there cannot be smoke without fire. So, Nyaya, uh, you know, places importance on observation of many external cases. Then, how do we discover Vyapti correctly? Now, how do we know that wherever smoke, there fire really holds, and we aren't making a mistake? For instance, wherever an ass, there's smoke. So, uh, so we have a discussion. So wherever that and as their smoke is clearly fallacious, right? So how do we ensure that we don't make conclusions like this, following the same pattern that wherever smoke, there fire? So then we have Nyaya versus Mimamsa on Vyapti. So Mimamsa says that it is enough that in all observed cases where there is smoke, there is fire, right? If we have never seen a counter case, that is, if we have never seen smoke without fire, we can assert a Vyapti. So, Nyaya says that this alone is not enough. Uh, for true Vyapti, we need first Anvay Vyapti, that is, in all the cases where smoke is present, fire is present, right? And we also need Vyatirek Vyapti. That is, in all cases where fire is absent, smoke is also absent. So, we not only should we check for all the positive instances, but we should also check for all the negative instances or co-absence. So, why simple co-presence and co-absence are not enough, right? We appeal to the same as in smoking example. So Nyaya gives a famous illustration. Uh, Suppose in 100 cases we see a smoke and we also see an ass sitting nearby. And in many cases, without smoke, there is no ass, right? Uh, so even then, we cannot say that wherever there is smoke, there is an ass or vice versa, because the ass is not doing any causal or essential work, and the presence of the ass is merely accidental. The fact that we have never yet seen smoke without an ass doesn't make them essentially connected. Therefore, Nyaya asserts that if we want to say there is Vyapti, we need something which is more strong, which is more robust than merely saying that so far always together and so far, absent together. We need a wide or varied experience where introduction of the supposed cause brings the effect and withdrawal of the cause with other conditions removes the effect. So in technical terms, yasmin sati bhavanam yato vina na bhavanam. When this is present, that comes into being, and without this, that does not come into being. So this is the ideal of the proper Anvay Vyatirek inquiry. When this is present, that comes into being, and without this, that cannot come into being. Then we have a problem of hidden condition or upadhi. So even when Anvay Vyatirek appear to hold, there might be a hidden condition or upadhi which we can mistake for the real hetu. For instance, we see all fire in green wood, that is, produces smoke. But actually, fire in dry or smokeless things, for example, red hot iron does not produce smoke. So the true Vyapti is not wherever fire there is smoke, but wherever smoke there fire. And because, and what is the Vyapti here? Vyapti is the fire associated with the green wood. So wherever fire, there smoke is incorrect, because fire only in dry, fire only in special, pardon me. So the true Vyapti is not wherever fire, there smoke, but wherever smoke, there fire. Fire associated with green wood is the relevant causal complex. And there, green wood is an upadhi. Why? Because green wood is a special condition which always accompanies fire that produces smoke. Without that green wood, the observed condition, fire to smoke, would not be universal. Right? Uh, so Nyaya says that how to be sure of Vyapti, we must be sure that no such upadhi is sneaking in. How? And this is to be done by bhuyo darshan, or the wide and repeated experience under varied conditions. So, and later on, Navinay put, placed very much emphasis on diagnosing the upadhis. And in modern violence, upadhis are like confounding variables in, experiments and statistics. The Nyaya and Buddhists agree on many procedural points in Vyapti discovery, but they differ on the metaphysical explanation. Buddhists want to reduce concomitance to either cause to effect or identity of essence, that is, genus to species. But Nyaya says there are inferences that don't neatly, fit into either. For instance, where the moon rises, the ocean tide rises. So for Nyaya, this is a noticed regularity, even if you cannot establish causation. There is no causation, but when the moon rises, the ocean tide rises. This doesn't fit in either into cause, effect, or identity of essence. So Nyaya is more empiricist. So Nyaya talks about a natural fixed order, that when this happens, that happens. And that natural fixed order can be known from experience, and that can be known from experience without positing any prior identity of essence. Different causes can give similar effects. So, can we still infer the cause? Nyaya says yes, because each effect, if we consider it along with all its attendant circumstances and details, will have unique traits. For instance, if a street floods, let's say, it could be due to heavy rainfall or it could be due to the rise of water in a nearby river. But upon careful observation, the way the water flows, is it the small rivulets from the roof or is it the broad sheets from river channel? We can tell which cause is responsible. So even when different causal complexes can superficially produce outcomes which are very similar, a fine-grained observation of the effect and the circumstances therein allows us to differentiate between them and infer the correct cause. So Nyaya relies on empirical induction based on the uniform and uninterrupted agreement in nature, while the Buddhists lean more on the a priori principles of causality or essential identity. Thus, Nyaya is closer to what we would now call a scientific method, that is careful observation of positive and negative instances, then eliminating the upadhis, and then building of regularities from our experiences. How does Prashasthapada define inference then? So, according to him, inference is the knowledge of that which is associated with the reason by the sight of the reason. So, he defines a valid ling or reason as one that, first of all, it should be connected either through Samyog or Samavay with the object of inference. For example, does smoke really inhere in that hill? It should exist wherever the object of inference exists, and it should be absent in all cases where the object of inference is absent. So these really are essentially are the Nyaya conditions of Paksha Dharmata, so Paksha Satta, and Vipaksha Vyavritti, dressed in the Vaisheshika language. So then uh, the Prashastpad's view of a valid hetu. So Nyaya's three requirements are Paksh Sattva, Sapaksh Sattva, and Vipaksh Sattva. The former, that reason must be present in the Paksh, must be present in similar cases where the Sadh is known to hold, and must be absent in dissimilar cases where the Sadh is absent. Now, Prashastvat quotes Kanad and Kashyap to demonstrate that this is already there in the Vaisheshik Sutra. So from Kanad we can infer cause from effect, effect from cause, or one thing from another when they are mutually related. A, and a hetu is valid when it is duly associated with the object to be inferred, but the hetu fails when there is no proper association. And Kanad lists three ways a reason can fail. First of all, it is non-existent in the paksh, that is, there is absence of paksh sattva. It has no real connection with the sadhya, and its existence is doubtful and or sandigh. Prashastpad illustrates with horn example. For example, this ass is a horse because it has horns, right? So what is the fallacy? Fallacy is that neither the asses nor the horses have horns. So the hetu is absent in both paksha and sapaksha. So it is a failure of paksha sattva and sapaksha sattva. The animal, second assertion, the animal is a cow because it has horns. So, what is the fallacy? That there is no concomitance between horns and cowhood. So, the hetu occurs in many vipakshas. So, there is a vipaksha or non-cows. So, there is a failure of vipaksha sattva. So, these that what criterion Prashasthabad places, they match Nyaya's threefold test of a good reason. Then Prashastapad thinks that the various type of Kannada sutras, that is cause from effect, effect from cause, these are just examples. These are not exhaustive list. Inference in general is any reasoning where the connection is grasped such that one thing is knowable via the another. So he then classifies inference into two main kinds. The first one being trust, which is from a known case to the same class. So thrust or perceived resemblance. In it, we moved from one instance of a class to another instance of the same class based on a distinctive characteristic we have learned. For instance, we learn that only cows have a particular hanging mass of flesh on the neck. Uh, so later, when we see that same hanging flesh on another animal's neck, we infer that this is a cow. So this is thrust. So previously known case and the inferred case are of exactly the same type. And then there is the samanyato drashta, that is from one class to a different class via a common feature. So we extend inference uh, to a different class of objects. Why do we do so? Because they share some general characteristic with a known case. For example, we observe that a peasant's work is rewarded by a good harvest. So we then infer that the priest's ritual performances will be rewarded with heaven because they are both work done to get a result. So here, work to reward in one domain farming is generalized, and we also infer work to reward in another or sacrifice. So Prashastapad's twofold division is psychological. Drust, we have same class direct resemblance. Samanyato Drashta, we have different class via general shared property. Then we have Swarthanuman and Pararthanuman and the five member syllogism. So now we analyze for whom the inference is made. So Swarthanuman is inference for oneself, and it is done to settle one's own doubt. Pararthanuman is the inference made for others, and it is expressed in a formal structure in order to convince someone who doubts, errs, or is ignorant. So Prashastapad accepts the five-part reasoning like Nyaya's five aware syllogism. In Nyaya, the five members are Pratigya, Hetu, Drishtanta, Upanaya, and Nigaman. Nigaman is the conclusion. So Pratigya is the thesis that the hill is fiery. Hetu is the reason because it has smoke. Drishtanta is the example where there is smoke, there is fire, as in the kitchen. So as in the kitchen is Drishtanta. Then we have Upanaya, which is the application. This hill has smoke like that. Then we have Nigamana, which is the conclusion that therefore the hill is fiery. In Vaishesik, uh, Prashastapad uses different names for the last four, that is Hetu, Drishtanta, Upanaya, and in Nigamana. Pratigya is the same as in Nyaya. He calls Hetu as Upadesh, Drishtanta as Nidarshan, uh, Upanaya as Anusandhan, and Nigamana as Pratyanumana. So it needs to be kept in mind that uh, the uh, in literature, for instance, these are alankars. No, if you want to give an example, Drishtanta alankar or Nidarshana alankar. So Kannada Sutra explicitly names only Upadesh, but Prashastapad fills out all the five. And Kannada also discusses fallacies of Nidarshan. So Nidarshan can be of two kinds. Nidarshan, or example. First is the agreement in presence, uh, showing a case where both Hetu and Sadhya occur. Whatever has motion is a substance as an arrow, right? And there is also agreement in absence, which is showing a case where absence of sadhya is accompanied by an absence of hetu. For example, what is not a substance has no motion, as in universal being. So, Kanad's also, Prashastapad also notes that examples themselves can have fallacy, right? That is, they can, that is called Nidarshana Abhasa if they do not generally illustrate the required concomitants. So, the author comments that these details, uh, you know, uh, that the Vaisheshik thinkers, through this we can know that the Vaisheshik thinkers were developing inference independently. They were not borrowing from Dignaga. Most of Prashatsva's innovation can be traced back to hints in Kannada Sutras. So we can conclude that his system is or we can infer rather, that his system is a natural expansion of Vaisheshik. It's not a Buddhist import. Then our focus here will shift to the doctrine of concomitance, that is, how exactly we know the relation between Hetu and Sadhya. So, Vatsyayan says that inference occurs when seeing the Hetu or Ling, Ling is the Hetu, we remember the major term or Sadhya with which we had earlier perceived it. So, the immediate trigger is when we see smoke, which is the hetu, to remembering fire. And Udyotakara says about Ling Paramarsh, that is, he refines this. He asks whether inference depends on the present perception of the hetu or memory of its connection with the sadhya. He answers that both are involved, but the direct cause of inference is the Ling Paramarsh, that is, present perception of the hetu in the paksh, and it is accompanied by the memory of its invariable connection with the sadhya. So, just remembering the universal connection does not give us inference. We must see smoke here and then recall. So, this recall part is extremely crucial, that smoke is always with fire. This complex mental act or paramarsh produces the inferential knowledge. But Udyotakara does not analyze what concomitance itself is. That question is taken up by Buddhists and Vachaspati. Now we come to Dharma Kirti's Tadatmya and Tadutpati and Vachaspati's critique of it. So Dharma Kirti had proposed that the essential principle behind Linga Sadhya connection is either Tadatmya, identity of essence, or Tadutpatti, which is the cause effect relation. To this, Vachaspati places four objections. Vachaspati of Nyaya, he says that causality cannot be deterministically known as a separate relation. What do we mean by this? We mean that if we define causality as invariable immediate antecedence, that is, whenever fire, then smoke, and where no fire, no smoke, even after that, we have no proof that in each case smoke is caused only by fire and not by some invisible demon. So without eliminating such unknown factors, we cannot be sure of pure cause effect. We can be sure only of constant conjunction. Even if we grant that we can identify cause effect, so even in that case, cause precedes effect, and if we see smoke now, we can at best prove that there was fire earlier. We cannot prove that there is fire now. But many inferences, like there is fire on the hill now, are concurrent. These are not past tense. Third point being that there are valid inferences without cause effect or identity of sense, that is, without tadatmya or tadutpatti. For instance, the sunrise of today is the same as that of yesterday. This is neither an identity relation nor a causal relation. And the fourth being that in the tadatmya, that is the identity case, fine entry, for instance, if the two things are genuinely identical, there can be no inference from one to the other. They are the same. in inference, one thing is known through another, and we which presupposes a distinction. So the two trees being totally identical, there is nothing inference as such. They are the same, like they are generally identical. But one thing is in inference, one thing is known through another. So we presuppose a distinction. So the nature of concomitance cannot be fully captured by cause effect or identity of essence alone. uh, Some things are naturally connected with other, even if we don't know the deeper metaphysical ground. This natural fixed relation is enough for Vyapti and inference. So Vachaspati concedes that fire is only connected with smoke under certain specific conditions. For example, if there is burning green wood, but there might be some upadhis or unknown conditions that could later undermine an apparent vyapti. But Vachaspati concedes that after many observations and careful search, if no such upadhi is found, then adopting a very rational practice, we should trust the natural relation. In that sense, Nyāya-Vaiśeṣika is very experience oriented. Then Buddhists also had proposed something called Panchakarani, and we will also see Nyaya's response to it. So Buddhists propose a method called Panchakarani to determine causality. That is, the first point is that we first perceive neither cause nor effect. Second, then cause appears. Third, immediately after effect appears. Fourth, then the cause disappears. And fifth, immediately after the effect disappears as well. So if the fivefold pattern holds, that is, first neither cause nor effect, second cause disappears, third effect appears, then cause disappears, and immediately effect disappears. If this pattern holds, we can assert a cause-effect relation. To this, Vachaspati says that even this method cannot guarantee infallible certainty about causation. Certain upadhis could still intrude, but if cause effect analysis gives no higher certainty than a simple observed regularity, we should better accept a natural concomitance, that is niyam or vyapti, without restricting it to cause or effect form. So, we can have a brief summary about how Nyaya classifies different types of inference. So that is, classical Nyaya's threefold division is Purvat, from cause to effect, that is, inferring future rain from heavy dark clouds. Sheshvat, from effect to cause, inferring that it has rained from the rise of water in the river. Here effect is given, cause is inferred. And third, samanyato drashta, which is inference not based on clear cause effect. That is, inferring sour taste of tamarind from its form and color, where the regular association is known, but the regular association has not been analyzed causally. Nyaya Manjari adds another type, that is parisankhyana or prasanga, which is reductio ad absurdum, that you know uh, you assert that consciousness belongs to the soul or atman, and because it has already been ruled out that consciousness can belong to any other part of the person, since it must belong somewhere, the consciousness, and all other candidates are eliminated, it is forced upon the soul. So this is how prasang or parisamkhyana, which is sort of like reductio ad absurdum, inference takes place. So all these variants are ultimately just different patterns for using vyapti. Vyapti is the invariable concomitance of the hetu and sadhya. So later Navya Nyaya systematized inference more technically. The first is the Anvay Vyatireki, which is the inference based on both agreement in presence, that is Anvay, whether there is smoke, where there is smoke, there is fire, An agreement in absence, that is Vyatirek, where there is no fire, there is no smoke. Then we have Keval Anvai. So in Keval Anvai, only the positive instances exist, and we don't have a clear class of places where the Sadhya is absent. For instance, in some theistic arguments, whatever is produced has a cause, and we encounter produced things, so the Vyatirek side is unclear. In the Kevalavya Vireki, uh, only negative instances are used. So we can say that wherever the reason is absent, the sadh is absent. For example, a classic example of this is the inference of the self from the absence of consciousness in the non-selves. That is formally built as a pure, Vyatirek pattern. And these are useful for the subtle logical analysis in Navya. Then what are the five avyavas of Pararthanuman? So that is, Pararthanuman is the inference from others. Uh, uh, so Pratigya Hetu, uh, Udaharan, Upnayan, Nigaman we have seen. So for a listener, uh, you know, this structure if we follow, Pratigya Hetu, Udaharan, Upnayan and Nigamana, this structure makes it explicit for the listener, the thesis, the reason, the general Vyapti shown by an example, the application to the present case, and a final conclusion. So, uh, the, so, uh, so Navyanya is formal classification of inference in, you know, uh, this we can elaborate some point more. For example, in Kevala Vayan, uh, only positive case. Vyapti is known only from positive instances. And you know, so Vyapti, wherever Prameyatva, there Vachyatva is grounded purely in agreement cases, right? Because we haven't met an object that isn't an object of knowledge, so we cannot find a case or object of knowledge but no name, right? And Kevala Vyatirekin is the only negative pattern. Let's say Earth is distinct from other elements because it has smell. We know only the Earth has smell, air, and air, fire, water don't have smell. So because there is only one positive instance, so the relation you know, whatever is not different from other elements is not Earth. This is Kevalya Vyatirekin. So then we move on to Upaman, which is the knowledge by comparison or analogy. So Vaisheshik doesn't accept it, but Nyaya does as a separate Pramāṇa. Upman is knowing an unknown thing together with its name. And by first being told a similarity and later seeing something similar and making the association oneself. Classic example of this is, the Gavai example that a city man has never seen a Gavai. In the forest, he asks a forest dweller, what is a Gavai? The forest dweller says, it's just like a cow. Then the man sees a strange animal in the forest. He finds it similar to a cow and then thinks that this must be the Gavai the forester spoke of. So this cognition that the unknown animal is Gavai is generated by Upaman because he was given verbal information that the Gavai is like a cow. But the crucial step, that is the linkage, that instruction to this new perception is done by him. And how does he do that? He uses the experience similarity. Now, note that if the forester had pointed to the animal and said that this is a Gavai, that would be Shabd. That is, the knowledge would be through Shabd, not Upaman. So, Upaman is defined as knowledge of an unknown object by associating it with a known name. because of perceived similarity to what was earlier told. And Nyaya is very realistic here in the sense that, you know, the sadrish or similarity is treated as an objective quality perceived by the eye. Similarity is not treated as a mental construction or subjective comparison. But Upman is not just a perception of similarity. Upman is a separate cognitive act. The first act is that the visual sense perceived similarity between this animal and a cow. And the second act is that the mind associates this similarity with the earlier linguistic instruction that Gavai is like a cow, and the mind concludes that this is Gavai. So that association, uh, with the earlier linguistic instruction is very important. And this is what Nyaya labels the Upman Praman. Then we have Shabd or testimony as a Praman. So right knowledge derived from the utterance of a trustworthy speaker is a Shabd Praman. So for Nyaya, infallible and absolutely truthful persons, so paradigmatically, Ishwar speaking through the Vedas is, a very trustworthy speaker. So Vedas are not valid just because they are ancient texts, but Vedas are, treated or considered to be the utterances of Ishwar, the omniscient Ishwar, and they have, come out as the utterances of an infallible Ishwar. Therefore, knowledge from Veda is correct. But classical Vaisheshika doesn't treat Shabd as a separate command. So Vaisheshika tried to reduce testimony to inference that these words are spoken by an infallible person, therefore what he says must be true. So in the classical Vaisheshika position, validity of Shabd is grounded in Anuman. Is it from that is in utterance of a reliable speaker to true content. But this reduction is hard to reconcile with Vaisheshika Sutra themselves. So, because the Vaisheshika Sutras take the Vedas as authoritative without giving, such an inferential justification, which some scholars point out about classical Vaisheshika. So, there appears to be some rift. And since historically Nyaya and Vaisheshika do converge, both treat Vedic words as authoritative, uh, but only Nyaya gives Shabd a separate Praman list formally.